Nathan Carter had seen the horrors of war from every angle. As a seasoned soldier, he had fought on countless battlefields, each one leaving its mark. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him upon his return home. The city that he had once sworn to protect, that had been his refuge from the chaos of war, was now a graveyard of shattered dreams and broken lives. Skyscrapers, once symbols of human achievement, were now nothing more than hollowed-out carcasses, their steel bones exposed to the harsh winds that swept across the deserted streets. The scent of smoke and decay clung to the air, and the once vibrant neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Standing amidst the ruins, Nathan felt a wave of overwhelming emptiness wash over him. His hands trembled as he reached out to touch the remnants of a building that had once been a hub of life. How many lives had been lost here? How many families had been torn apart? The questions swirled in his mind, but no answers came. He was left standing in the silence, haunted by the faces of the people he had failed to protect, by the soldiers he had lost, and by the crushing weight of his own guilt. In his heart, Nathan had always believed that his sacrifices on the battlefield were for something greater, that the bloodshed, the pain, and the endless battles would lead to a lasting peace. But now, in the ruins of his own city, that belief seemed like a cruel joke. He had given everything to the cause, but what was left? What was the point of all the sacrifice if the world he fought for was now a barren wasteland? His thoughts were interrupted by a low, almost imperceptible hum, the distant sound of helicopters, of more military units mobilizing. It wasn't over. The war that had consumed his life was not done yet. But for Nathan, the fight no longer felt meaningful. He had seen too much, lost too much, and now the idea of continuing to fight seemed both pointless and unbearably exhausting. He had been trained to endure, to push through the pain, but as he stood there, surveying the destruction, something in him broke. He had spent years in the trenches, fighting for survival, for honor, for something he hoped was worth it. But all of it seemed so hollow now. What had he been fighting for? He had lost his comrades, his home, and his faith. The questions gnawed at him, relentless and unforgiving. As he walked through the empty streets, Nathan's footsteps echoed in the stillness, a stark reminder of how far he had drifted from the person he once was. The war had stripped him of everything he held dear, and the man who had once stood tall, proud of his duty, now felt like a ghost walking through a place he no longer recognized. The walls that had once protected him now felt like a prison, a cage that kept him trapped in his own guilt and despair. The more Nathan tried to make sense of it all, the more the questions seemed to multiply. Had the war truly been about defending his city, his people, his way of life? Or had it been a senseless cycle of violence that he and so many others had been trapped in, with no way out? Was there ever a real chance for peace? Or had it all been an illusion, a story they had been told to keep them fighting? His mind wandered back to the faces of his comrades, the men and women he had fought alongside. Some had died in battle. Others had been lost to the relentless trauma of war. And now, he was left alone, standing among the ruins of the world they had fought to protect. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, a cosmic joke. What was the point of it all? What had their sacrifices achieved? Was this the price of war? Nathan's heart grew heavy with each passing moment. He had been part of something that seemed so noble, so necessary at the time, but now, in the aftermath, it felt like the worst kind of lie. The world was not at peace. The fighting had not stopped. There was no victory here, only the silence of destruction and the weight of unanswered questions. As he stood in the wreckage, staring at the smoldering ruins of the city, Nathan's heart hardened. The war had taken everything from him, his hope, his faith, and his belief in the cause. He was left with nothing but the ghosts of the past and the knowledge that the war was far from over. The world he had fought for, the world he had risked everything for, was now just a memory. And in the quiet, amidst the devastation, Nathan found himself struggling with the harsh truth. He had no idea what the future held, but he couldn't keep running from the unanswered questions. For the first time in years, Nathan didn't know what he was fighting for. and that scared him more than any enemy he had ever faced. Nathan's world was already shattered, the weight of his past and the ruins of his home pressing down on him. But nothing had prepared him for the encounter that would change everything, an encounter that would make him question what it truly meant to be human. It was in the shadows of a forgotten alley, surrounded by the remnants of the city's broken structures, where Nathan first saw her. At first glance, she seemed out of place, like a fragile wisp of something foreign, something not meant to exist in this world. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim light, a pale, otherworldly glow that contrasted sharply with the dull grays of the city around her. She was crouched against the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her gaze distant and haunted, as if she were trying to disappear into the very fabric of the air around her. Nathan's first instinct was to approach with caution. She was unlike anything he had ever seen before, and yet there was something undeniably human about her too. Despite her alien appearance, there was a pain in her eyes that mirrored his own. He hesitated for a moment, unsure whether she would be friend or foe, but something in her stillness made him lower his guard. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his voice soft, trying to bridge the gap between their worlds. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, as though the world itself was holding its breath. She didn't respond immediately, her eyes never leaving the ground. Nathan took a step closer, the distance between them charged with tension. He had no idea who or what she was, but there was a certain vulnerability in her posture, something that made his heart ache. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way her body flinched at the smallest movement, like a wounded animal too scared to trust. It wasn't until Nathan knelt down before her, trying to be as non-threatening as possible, that she finally spoke. Her voice, when it came, was low, almost a whisper, but the coldness in it cut through the air like a blade. "Why are you here?" Her words held a rawness to them, like they were ripped from a place deep within her, a place filled with too much pain and too many unanswered questions. "What do you want from me?" Nathan wasn't sure what to say at first. He had been trained to speak to enemies, to give orders, but this was different. This wasn't a soldier or a civilian caught in the crossfire. This was something else, something entirely new, something alien. He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts, before speaking with the honesty he could no longer hide. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I don't know who you are or where you come from, but I know one thing. You're not a weapon. You're not a trophy to be claimed." He took a breath, trying to find the right words. "You're a person, and if you let me, I can help you." She scoffed at his words, a bitter laugh escaping her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. The hardness in her gaze only deepened. "You're all the same," she muttered. "You humans say the same things. You come to us with promises of help, but all you really want is to use us. You see us as tools to fight your wars. You don't understand us. You never have." Her words stung, and Nathan felt the weight of them, but he didn't flinch. He had heard the bitterness in her voice, the deep-rooted cynicism that came from being betrayed, manipulated, and used by those she once trusted. He understood it in a way that perhaps only another broken soul could. "I can't change what's been done to you," Nathan said, his tone gentle but firm. "But I can give you a choice. I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I just want you to know that you don't have to fight alone. There's more to life than the war you've been forced into. I won't make you a tool. I won't make you fight." Iris looked up at him then, her eyes sharp, searching him as though trying to see through the walls he had built around his own heart. For a long moment, she said nothing, and Nathan could almost feel the weight of her doubts hanging in the air, like a storm about to break. "You think I have a choice?" Iris finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The rawness in her words seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. "I was born into this. My entire existence was a weapon, a pawn in someone else's game. You don't understand. I don't get to choose." She looked away, the tears threatening to spill, but she held them back with a fierce determination. "I was captured, tortured, used, and now you think I can just walk away from it all? You think that just because you offer me some kind of Freedom? That I'll believe you? Nathan's heart twisted. He could feel her pain, deep and visceral, like a wound that had never healed. And yet, he knew there was more to her than the scars she wore, more to her than the walls she had built to protect herself from the world. I don't expect you to trust me right away, Nathan said, his voice softer now, the words coming from a place deep within him. But I will help you. Not because I have to, but because I want to. You deserve that. You deserve to decide your own fate. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Nathan watched her, trying to gauge whether she would accept his words or push him away like everyone else had. But there was something in her eyes now, something fragile yet hopeful, a spark that he hadn't seen before. She wasn't ready to trust him completely, not yet, but she was willing to listen, and for Nathan, that was enough for now. As Nathan and Iris made their way through the desolate remnants of the war-torn landscape, their journey became a test of endurance, not just of their bodies, but of their hearts. The devastation around them was a stark reminder of everything they had lost, the world they once knew, their identities, their very sense of belonging. Every step they took in the barren wasteland was a silent testament to the battles they had fought, the struggles they had survived. But neither of them was truly free of the war's grip. At first, their relationship was one of sheer necessity. Nathan, a soldier hardened by years of warfare, had learned to keep his distance from everyone, including Iris. She, an alien woman who had been molded by cruelty and captivity, wasn't in a place to trust anyone, least of all a human soldier. They were both trapped in their own isolation, struggling to reconcile their realities with the fragile, uncertain bond forming between them. The silence between them was thick, punctuated only by the occasional rustling of debris as they navigated through the ruins. Nathan would scan the horizon for danger, his mind always alert, while Iris kept her distance, her eyes darting around with an edge of suspicion. There were times when Nathan caught a glimpse of her, standing slightly apart, her posture rigid, as if she were preparing to flee at a moment's notice. Her wariness was understandable. After all, she had been betrayed, used, and discarded by those who had once promised her safety. Trust was not something she could give easily. For Nathan, it was difficult to keep moving forward with her, not because of any malice, but because of his own inner conflict. His life had been defined by combat, by orders, and by the cold, hard reality of survival. Now, suddenly, he was responsible for something beyond himself, something he didn't fully understand. Iris was not just an alien, not just someone he had been ordered to protect. She was a person, and the realization hit Nathan harder than he had expected. He could feel the weight of it in his chest. There was a subtle shift within him, a quiet, growing urge to protect her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Still, the walls between them remained. When they spoke, it was not with warmth, but with guarded words. They were both trying to navigate a world that had taught them to be distrustful, even of those who might offer a hand of kindness. The tension between them was palpable. Nathan would offer a hand to help her over a broken piece of concrete, and she would hesitate, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. When they rested for a moment, he would attempt conversation, but she would offer only curt, emotionless responses. "I don't know what to do with you," Nathan muttered one evening as they sat beneath the shattered remains of a once great building, the sky darkening overhead. His voice was tinged with frustration, not at her, but at the situation they found themselves in. "But I can't leave you here. Not like this." Iris turned to him, her face unreadable. "So, what is it you want from me?" she asked, her tone distant, almost challenging. "You want my trust? You think you can just fix everything because you found me lying here in the dirt?" Her voice was cool, and her eyes, though tired, still carried a fire that Nathan had seen in few others. The fire of someone who had been through too much to be saved by simple gestures. "No," Nathan said, the weight of her words hitting him harder than he expected. "I'm not asking for your trust. I'm just saying, I won't leave you behind. Not when you need help." Her lips twisted into something resembling a bitter smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Help? How can you help me? You've been trained to kill, to destroy. What do you know about healing? About trust? Her words stung. Nathan didn't know what to say. He had never been taught how to heal, how to build trust, how to reach someone who had been shattered by life's cruelties. His entire existence had been defined by conflict, by the constant pull of survival and violence. But something about Iris, something about the way she carried herself despite everything, made him want to try. I don't have all the answers, he admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. But I know I can't do this alone. And neither can you. I don't expect you to trust me right away, Iris. I get that. But I'm here. And I'm not leaving you. She looked at him for a long time after that, as if weighing his words, testing the sincerity in them. It was a moment that stretched on for what felt like an eternity, both of them caught in the gravity of their shared loneliness, their shared pain. Finally, Iris broke the silence. You don't get it, do you? She said, her voice softer now, the edge of bitterness replaced by something more fragile. You think I'm just going to open up and let you in? You think because you're here, because you're offering help, that I'm going to trust you? You're wrong. But even as she spoke, Nathan could see a flicker of something else in her eyes. It was the smallest of changes, the faintest hint of vulnerability, a crack in the wall she had built around herself. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I know you don't trust me, Nathan said, his voice steady, unwavering. I don't expect that. But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. The journey continued, and with every step, Nathan found himself becoming more and more aware of the quiet pull he felt toward Iris. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't about fulfilling a duty or a mission. It was something deeper, something more personal. It was a connection that was forming, fragile and delicate, but undeniable. For Iris, the walls were coming down too, though she would never admit it aloud. Every small act of kindness from Nathan, every time he refused to leave her side, chipped away at the armor she had built to protect herself. Slowly, but surely, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, not all humans were the same. Maybe not all of them saw her as a tool, as something to be used. Maybe there was more to her existence than pain and suffering. They still had a long way to go, and the road ahead was uncertain, but in that moment, as they walked side by side, there was a quiet understanding between them. Trust was something that would take time, but it had begun. And sometimes, that was all they could ask for. The tension between Nathan and Iris had reached a breaking point. What had once been a journey fueled by the barest flicker of trust was now becoming a frantic race for survival. The remnants of a shattered world were no longer their only threat. The real danger now lay in the relentless pursuit of the Virexian mercenaries who had begun to close in on them. What started as a seemingly innocent escape, a mere flight from the remnants of war, had quickly turned into a battle against not just physical adversaries, but the shadow of death itself. It was on a bleak, moonless night that the true cost of their journey became evident. After days of traveling through the barren landscapes, they found refuge in an abandoned house. Its walls, once solid, now crumbled, leaving the place to decay in quiet surrender. The house offered them some protection from the elements, a brief respite from the unrelenting forces chasing them, and a moment of false security. They needed to rest, but neither of them could shake the constant, nagging fear that danger was always just a heartbeat away. Nathan, still haunted by the toll of war, could hardly relax. His fingers twitched at the hilt of his weapon, his eyes never straying too far from the shadows, scanning every crevice, every window. Iris, too, sat on the floor, her posture tense, her eyes fixed on the door. She had no trust in safety, not after everything she had been through. Every sound, no matter how small, made her jump. The soft creaks of the building, the distant howling of the wind, all felt like the whispers of an impending storm. The silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. The Virexians had found them. Panic gripped Nathan's chest as his military instincts kicked in. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard. The Phyrexian mercenaries were no ordinary soldiers. They were brutal, ruthless, and efficient. Nathan knew the cost of being captured. It was a price neither he nor Iris was willing to pay. The air was thick with the stench of fear, but there was no time for hesitation. In an instant, Nathan leaped to his feet, signaling for Iris to follow. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into the shadows, their footsteps muffled against the crumbling floor. They moved swiftly, silently, through the darkened house. The walls, though once strong, now stood as fragile barriers between them and their pursuers. Every corner felt like a death trap. Every shadow held the threat of danger. As the Phyrexians drew closer, Nathan realized that there was no way out. The only option left was to fight. "Stay close," Nathan whispered, his voice low but steady. He felt Iris's hand grip his arm tighter, and though he couldn't see her face, he knew she was just as terrified as he was. But they both knew that fear would only slow them down. They had to act. The mercenaries stormed into the house, their boots thudding heavily against the floor as they searched for any signs of their prey. Nathan's heart raced, the sound of his own blood pounding in his ears. He had no plan, no backup, just the instinct to survive. Then, in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Iris, who had been eerily quiet up until this point, stepped forward. She moved with a fluidity that Nathan had never seen before, her body a blur of motion, as she swiftly disarmed one of the Phyrexian soldiers. The mercenary let out a grunt of surprise, but before he could react, Iris had already knocked him unconscious, her face cold and focused. Nathan stood there for a moment, stunned. He had seen soldiers fight before, had fought alongside some of the most skilled warriors in the world, but never had he seen someone fight with such grace, such efficiency. There was a quiet strength in her, something he hadn't expected, given the fragile image she had projected. "You know how to fight?" Nathan asked, his voice full of surprise as he watched her move, each strike precise and calculated. "Why didn't you tell me?" Iris didn't pause. She dispatched another soldier with a swift blow to the throat, her eyes steely with resolve. "I wasn't always like this," she replied, her voice low but firm. "I was a scientist, an engineer. But surviving out here? It's not just about knowledge. You have to know how to face death when it comes knocking at your door." Her words hit Nathan harder than he expected. There was a raw honesty in them, a truth he had never wanted to confront. Survival wasn't just about strategies or tactics. It was about confronting your deepest fears and learning to fight back when everything seemed lost. Iris wasn't just surviving, she was living in her own way with the knowledge that every day might be her last. Nathan, on the other hand, had been fighting wars for so long that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to truly live. He moved with renewed purpose, firing at the remaining Phyrexian soldiers. The fight became a blur, a dance of destruction, of chaos and bloodshed, where survival was the only goal. The Phyrexians, despite their strength and training, were no match for the raw determination of Nathan and Iris. The adrenaline coursed through Nathan's veins, pushing him beyond his limits, urging him to fight like he never had before. The sound of gunfire, the grunts of combat, all became distant echoes as his focus narrowed on one thing: survival. Iris, too, was a force to be reckoned with. She moved with precision, her body a weapon in itself, her every motion a calculated response to the threat in front of her. It wasn't just about physical strength. It was about the years of pain and betrayal she had endured, the survival instinct that had been honed over time. She was a woman who had been broken and rebuilt, and now, she fought not just for herself, but for something more. For the fragile bond she was beginning to form with Nathan. By the time the last of the Phyrexian soldiers lay defeated on the floor, both Nathan and Iris were breathing heavily, covered in sweat and blood. The silence that followed the chaos was almost deafening, the weight of what they had just endured settling heavily on their shoulders. Nathan looked at Iris, a newfound respect in his eyes. She had proven herself in ways he had never anticipated, and in that moment, he realized that she wasn't just an alien. She was a warrior in her own right. More than that, she was someone who had shown him a different way of surviving, a way of facing the world with strength and resilience, even when everything seemed lost. "You're not just a scientist, are you?" Nathan said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Iris met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I was," she replied. "But now, I'm just someone trying to survive, just like you." The battle was over. But the war, the fight for survival, had only just begun. And together they would face whatever came next, no matter how dark or dangerous it might be. As the days stretched into weeks, the dynamic between Nathan and Iris continued to evolve. What began as a strained alliance, born out of necessity, gradually transformed into something deeper, something neither of them had anticipated. In the harsh, unforgiving wasteland they now navigated, the constant threats and dangers forced them to rely on each other in ways neither had imagined. They fought side by side, faced death together, and slowly, the walls they had built around themselves began to crumble. For Nathan, the transformation was subtle at first. There were moments when he'd catch a glance from Iris, fleeting but meaningful, or when she would reach out to touch his arm after a close encounter with death, her touch a silent reassurance that she was still there. Each time they survived another assault or narrowly escaped capture, Nathan couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It wasn't just the thrill of victory, but something deeper. It was the feeling that, in those moments of danger, he wasn't alone anymore. He had someone to fight for, someone who relied on him as much as he had started to rely on her. Iris, too, began to feel a shift within herself. At first, she had been so consumed by the need to survive, to keep her heart walled off, that she barely noticed the change in her own emotions. But as time passed, the walls began to crack. The moments they shared, whether quiet conversations by a dying fire or the shared adrenaline rush of escaping yet another mercenary ambush, began to build something between them. She had never known companionship like this before, not since her capture. Back then, she had been a tool, an object used by others. But Nathan, he saw her as more than that. He didn't just want her for what she could do. He wanted to help her, to give her a chance at something better, even if that something was just survival. One night, after yet another skirmish had ended in their favor, they found themselves sitting by a small campfire, the crackling flames casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Iris had been quiet for most of the night, her thoughts drifting, when Nathan finally broke the silence. He had noticed the change in her, the way she seemed to carry a burden that wasn't entirely her own. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice gentle. "What's on your mind?" Iris hesitated for a moment, then looked up at him, her expression softer than usual. "I've never known anyone like you," she said, her voice low but steady. "You're the only one who doesn't see me as a tool, a weapon. You make me feel like I matter, like I'm not just here to survive, but that I'm worth something more." Nathan met her gaze, feeling a tightness in his chest. He wasn't sure what it was, this feeling that had been growing in him. It was more than just gratitude. It was something raw and real, something that had nothing to do with the desperate circumstances that had brought them together. "You matter to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "More than I can say." Iris looked away for a moment, her eyes searching the distance. "I don't know if I can trust that," she murmured. "I've been hurt before, used, abandoned. I can't go through that again." Nathan's heart clenched as he heard the pain in her words. He could see it now, the scars she carried, not just on her body, but in her soul. She had been broken, just like he had. But where Nathan had buried his pain beneath layers of duty and anger, Iris had let hers consume her, shaping her into someone who believed that love and trust were just illusions. But Nathan wasn't giving up. He couldn't. Not now. He had come to realize that there was something in Iris, something that was worth protecting, worth cherishing. And he wasn't about to let her slip away because of her fear, her past. "I'm not going anywhere," Nathan said firmly, his voice steady. "I know you've been through a lot, and I can't erase that. But I can show you that not everyone will hurt you. Not everyone is looking to use you." Iris looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as though trying to find some trace of dishonesty. some hidden agenda. But there was none. Just the truth in his gaze, and the unspoken promise of loyalty, something that she hadn't felt in a long time. Slowly she nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I'm not sure I can trust you completely," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you're the only one who's given me any reason to believe in something more. Something other than survival." Nathan felt a weight lift off his chest. It wasn't much, but it was something. They weren't there yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time since they had met, there was a glimmer of hope between them. A chance for something more than just survival. As they sat there side by side, the crackling of the fire filling the silence, something in the air shifted. The bond between them wasn't just about shared danger anymore. It was about shared strength. Iris had started to believe in something other than the next fight. And Nathan had started to believe in something beyond just the mission. For the first time, both of them allowed themselves to feel that connection, however fragile it might be. They had both been broken, both been lost in their own ways. But now, they had each other. And that was enough to face whatever the world threw at them next. Neither of them spoke for a long while after that. There was no need for words. Their emotions, their connection, spoke for them. In that moment, they knew that they would face whatever came next together, no matter what. As the days wore on, Nathan and Iris had begun to believe they might finally be free of the constant threat of danger. But that hope was short-lived. A dark shadow loomed once again on the horizon, this time in the form of General Zorak, the ruthless commander of the Virexian forces. Zorak had been tracking them for weeks, his soldiers relentless and his tactics cruel. He had never forgotten the sight of his prized weapon, Iris, escaping his control, and now he would stop at nothing to recapture her. But the threat wasn't just external. There were whispers among Nathan's own team, soldiers who had once sworn loyalty to him, but who were now questioning their mission. A sense of betrayal festered beneath the surface, unnoticed at first, until it became clear that some of Nathan's own men were quietly working against him. It was a revelation that would haunt him, forcing him to confront the fact that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from within. The tension between survival and loyalty was now a deadly balancing act, one that would test his ability to lead and protect those he cared for. Zorak's plan was meticulous. He knew that Nathan, with his military expertise and determination, would never fall easily. So he sent his best troops after them, a relentless squad of elite soldiers, trained to track and capture, and if needed, destroy. Zorak's personal vendetta against Nathan and Iris fueled his pursuit, and he was prepared to burn everything to the ground to achieve his goal. The first sign of trouble came during one of their brief moments of rest. As Nathan and Iris made camp, the eerie silence of the wasteland was broken by the distant sound of engines. Nathan's heart skipped a beat, his instincts immediately alerting him to the danger. He knew they were close, too close for comfort. Iris, sensing his unease, glanced at him with wide eyes. "We need to move." "Now," Nathan said, his voice low but urgent. Iris didn't hesitate, already gathering what little gear they had left. They had been on the run for so long that every moment of peace felt like an illusion. The firelight flickered in the dark, casting long shadows across their faces as they quickly extinguished their campfire and prepared for the worst. Nathan's mind raced as he formulated a plan. He wasn't going to make it easy for Zorak or his forces. He had been trained to fight, to outthink his enemies, and now he would use every skill he had to protect Iris. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. It was a fight to keep the one person he had come to care about safe from the forces that wanted to use her for their own gain. But even as they moved through the darkness, avoiding detection, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His suspicions were confirmed when he overheard a conversation between two of his own soldiers, whispering in the distance. They were talking about betrayal, about turning over Iris to the Virexians in exchange for their own safety. Nathan's blood ran cold. These were men he had fought alongside, trusted with his life, and now they were plotting his downfall. He gritted his teeth and approached them silently, Every muscle in his body coiled with anger and resolve. Confronting them would have to wait, but this new threat, the treachery within his ranks, made everything more complicated. He could no longer just focus on protecting Iris. Now, he had to ensure that the people around him weren't working against him too. Later that night, as the sounds of Zorak's forces drew nearer, Nathan stood in front of Iris, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He knew that there was no escaping the battle that was coming. No matter how many times they ran, no matter how well they hid, the Virexians would find them. He turned to Iris, his expression hardening with determination. "I'll protect you. No matter what it takes," Nathan promised, his voice firm. "They can't have you. No one has the right to take your freedom. I'll fight until my last breath." Iris looked back at him, her face a mix of fear and gratitude. The intensity in his eyes gave her a sliver of hope. She had never fully trusted anyone before, but now she could see the resolve in Nathan. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something greater, something worth dying for. As the first shots rang out in the distance, signaling the start of the inevitable clash, Nathan's grip tightened on his weapon. He knew the coming days would be a test of his strength, his leadership, and his ability to protect Iris from the forces that sought to destroy them. The battle had only just begun. But this time, there was no turning back. As the final battle loomed on the horizon, the weight of the situation grew heavier with each passing moment. The tension in the air was palpable, and the stakes had never been higher. Nathan and Iris stood side by side, facing the enemy forces that had relentlessly hunted them for so long. The Virexian army, now just a few yards away, was closing in. Their plan was clear: destroy Nathan and capture Iris at any cost. The question, however, wasn't whether they could survive. It was how far they were willing to go to protect each other. In this decisive moment, Iris found herself at a crossroads, a choice that would forever change the course of their journey. All her life, she had believed that survival was the only thing that mattered. She had learned to run, to hide, to endure pain without hope of something better. Her skills, honed under the cruelest of circumstances, had always been her only form of defense. But now, facing Nathan, she saw something she had never allowed herself to see before: the possibility of something more than survival. Nathan wasn't just another person she needed to protect herself from. He was the one person who had shown her kindness, who had made her believe that there could be more to life than simply existing. The internal struggle within Iris was fierce. Her mind raced as she recalled the years of abuse and betrayal that had shaped her view of the world. She had always seen herself as a weapon, something to be used and discarded. But Nathan's words, his actions, had begun to chip away at the walls she had built around her heart. He had treated her as an equal, as a person, not as a tool or a prisoner. And now, in this moment, as the sounds of the approaching enemy grew louder, Iris realized that she had something worth fighting for, something she had never thought possible. She had a connection with Nathan that went beyond survival. She wasn't just fighting to escape anymore. She was fighting to protect him, to protect what they had built together. Her decision was made. She couldn't turn away now, not when she had come so far, not when she finally felt the warmth of something she had longed for her entire life: trust, love, and the courage to stand alongside someone she cared about. She wasn't alone anymore, and she wasn't going to let fear dictate her actions. She turned to Nathan, her expression resolute, her voice unwavering. "I used to think I had nothing to lose," she said, her eyes locking onto his with a depth of emotion that spoke volumes. "But now I realize I can't lose you. I'll stand by you, I'll fight with you. Whatever happens, we face it together." Nathan looked at her, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. He had always known she was strong, but in that moment, as he saw the shift in her, he realized that she had become more than just a companion in this fight. She was his equal, his partner, and now, in the heat of battle, they were more than just two survivors. They were a team, and together, they could face anything. "We're not alone anymore," Nathan said, his voice steady with resolve. "Together, we'll fight. Together, we'll win." As the enemy forces surged forward, the sound of gunfire filling the air, Nathan and Iris stood side by side, ready to face the storm that was coming. There was no more running, no more hiding. This was the moment that defined them. The choice they had made was not just about survival. It was about love, trust, and the strength they had found in each other. The battle raged on, but Nathan and Iris fought with a fierceness that came from a place deeper than just their desire to survive. They fought for each other, for the life they had started to build, for the hope that even in the darkest of times, there could be light. As they took down enemy after enemy, side by side, it became clear that their bond was unbreakable. When the dust finally settled, the battlefield was strewn with the remnants of their struggle. But Nathan and Iris were still standing. They had made it through, and in doing so, they had forged a new path. One where they could look toward the future, not with fear, but with hope. The choice had been made. They were no longer two individuals fighting for their own survival. They were partners, united by their love and their commitment to each other. The story ended on a note of uncertainty, but not despair. Nathan and Iris stood together, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead, but no longer facing them as strangers. They had faced the worst and come out stronger. Whatever the future held, they knew they would face it together, unyielding and united in a bond that was stronger than anything they had ever known. Across the galaxies, across time itself. You've found your way here. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Let's see how far across the universe our community reaches. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow's episode will take you even deeper into the unknown. You won't want to miss it.